everyone, welcome to a new series. If you've watched my videos, you know I normally upload short videos, but I thought I don't usually get to cover some of the greater details in those short videos, only 3 minutes. So, what if I ump this up to 8-minute videos, maybe a little less, a little longer, really depends on the topic, and see if you guys enjoy it. Um, if you haven't watched my short video and you just stumble across this, it's perfectly fine. You don't have to. Obviously, I'd appreciate it if you did, but it's not. I'm not gonna. You're not gonna miss anything that I talked about then. I'll just go over what I said in that a little quickly, so I can get into the greater fact. But today we're talking about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Now, Martin Luther King Jr. obviously very important civil rights movement leader, very important to American history, very kind and peaceful man. There's some rumors about him that he did some maybe not so um, great things in his life, mainly when it comes to involving his wife. However, it seems like a lot of those are not real. Now, like with anybody that talks about this topic, I will get into a little bit of the conspiracy with it. Because I think, especially with more recent evidence, that it is a topic worth discussing. So now we get into the into the what happened. So Martin Luther King Jr. He's staying at this hotel motel area. Look at Rocky over there barking like a fool. Rocky, don't bark like a fool. Come on. But um, Martin Luther King Jr. He's staying at this motel. Um, he has given already a speech in Memphis. He had a few more things he was going to do in Memphis, Tennessee, and then he was going to leave and go to another place, like he did. He traveled a lot. He's sitting out on his balcony, uh, talking to some people down on the street. He's up on the second floor, and he's looking down. If you've ever seen um, any TV show with a motel, you know it's got the bottom rows of houses, and then it's got stairs that lead up, and it's got the top floor of houses. I say houses, but it's just rooms. But um, and he was sitting on that upper catwalk area, leaning on the railing and looking down and talking to people. Well, a shot rings out. Everyone hears it, and obviously it hits um, Martin Luther. Um, and instantly people rush up to him. They check him, and he obviously he's been fatally wounded and he dies. But the shot had come from across the street. A lot of people. It was a like taverny kind of building. Um, it was reported. Oh, it was second floor from this bathroom. They eventually catch the guy who they think did it. And all's well, right? They got him. Okay. They found out that he just was a racist and all this stuff. Now, that would typically be the end of the story. And you kind of wish sometimes that it was sometimes that simple. Obviously, you wouldn't want him to die, Martin Luther King Jr., but sometimes this happens. People aren't always the nicest. However, there is some more to this story. For instance, one thing that can be added to this story is that it really seems the guy that did shoot Martin Luther King Jr. Probably didn't do it. He said he never did it. Obviously, he's a criminal. Why would he ever say that? But this guy had a little interesting history. He used to work for the OSS. If you don't know what the OSS is, it's basically the precursor to the CIA during the Second World War. The OSS is a little different. Was a little less CIA, if you know what I mean. Um, so he had some training with stuff. He worked for some people, and he was just given this job. Hey, go do this, Okay, then I need you to drive this car. That's what he does, and that's how he gets caught. He's driving this car that was his, and he gets caught, and after the description of the guy that shot him and all this stuff. And he didn't even know about Martin Luther King Jr. dying until a little bit later. At least that's what he reports. Now, later, this is much, much later, he talks with the King family. And the King family does not believe he killed their father and their husband and all that stuff. They don't believe he killed him. They go to court, actually, against the U.S. government and sue them for something like $1. Well, they didn't want really the money. They wanted to prove a point, and they won. With the evidence that they had won. So that gives some idea of the interesting aspect of this case in that the shooter, at least according to the King family, under their belief, that he did not do it. He didn't do it. But it's just the King family. Maybe he's a very convincing guy. You know, it is what it is. All right, well, let's go back to the assassination site. Well, they say that he shoots from across the street from a second floor window of this building. Well, okay, well, where is the second floor window kind of placed? Well, it's a bathroom. Nope, I gotta break up Rocky and Mayhem here 1 second. Ugh. Rocky likes to tower over Mayhem because he's just a little guy. But, so it's a second floor bathroom, but when they try to recreate this shot, it's not impossible, but it's definitely a difficult shot. Martin Luther King Jr. is, where the line of sight would have been. This guy had to kind of sit on the toilet, and it was either sit on the toilet or sit on the rim of the bathtub in there, because what this place was. And it was a very, very uncomfortable and very unbalanced spot to sit. But hey, you know what? People can do weird shots. Maybe it happened. Okay. We'll go with that. That's what the main idea is. However, there's one big, big problem. At the time, now this doesn't exist here anymore, so if you try to go back and look at it now, at the spot now, it doesn't. The problem no longer exists. However, one of the issues is in front of this building, between Martin Luther King Jr. and this building, was a big tree. Now, you could always shoot through the tree, but the visibility of Martin Luther King Jr. is not so great. Not so great at all. Not to say he couldn't have made this shot. It's very possible. But it just so happens that that tree, the time the investigators show up, it gets cut down right away. They cut it down right away, remove it. The reasoning is basically, it's just to help with the case. But it's very suspicious, in my opinion, that they cut this tree down and they kind of removed the idea that tree could have even blocked the shot. Alright, well now you have the basic idea. So there's this guy, shoots across the street, might have been a tree in his way, but hey, they cut it down, so who knows. So now, I guess the question is, well, if it wasn't the guy that they claim killed him, and he acted alone, and all this stuff, well, who wanted Martin Luther King Jr. dead? Well, there's a few people who might have wanted this. One, the U.S. government. That is obviously a very leading theory. It was the U.S. government. They didn't like the civil rights movement because it was causing unrest in the United States, things like that. So they go after, well, the most prominent face of this movement, Martin Luther King Jr. It is a very well-founded theory. You could see why they would want to do this. It tracks with any idea of anything. That they would want to remove this person who they believe is an agitator. The other is a mob boss. So this mob boss, he's kind of a racist, and he doesn't really like Martin Luther King Jr. Finds out he's there, and he goes up and orders his hit, and that's what ends up happening. That's the other theory. Those are the main leading theories. Obviously, there is, of course, the idea that the guy that they said shot him did shoot him. That is always a possibility. The King family doesn't believe it, and a lot of evidence kind of points against it, but it's not impossible that he did that. You know, like I said, maybe he was a very convincing guy, possibly. But it's also possible that he didn't do it. Just a lot of evidence that he maybe didn't do it as well. All right. There is also technically a fourth theory, which is a combination between the mob one and the government one. One of the theories is that the government is the one who tells the mob leader, "Hey, we'll pay you, and we'll give you immunity from this if you call the hit." So that's the idea. Now, I'm not going to give judgment on which of these I believe is correct. Obviously, you can maybe guess from how I talked about certain things, but who can say what really happened to Martin Luther King Jr.? At this point, anyone that was really involved has passed away. Um, and there are some details of this that even I did not cover. Now, um, if you want a more comprehensive video, there are out there, and I would definitely recommend looking into them. Sorry, Rocky's barking at someone who's here that he wants to see. He wants their attention. But definitely look up those videos. There's a lot more evidence, and they go into even more detail than this. But I hope this is a good introduction to a lot of that greater detail. But now you know.